One day when I was a junior in high school, the bell had just rung, and I was on my way to art class. It was on the furthest end of the school, so I was walking pretty quickly to get there in time. All of a sudden, an announcement came on the intercom. It was the secretary from the front desk of the school. Her voice was shaky as she announced that the school had just been placed on lockdown, and everyone needed to get inside the room closest to them and follow lockdown procedures. Before hanging up, she said that this was not a drill. There was silence for a moment before total chaos erupted in the hallways. Everyone was running around and there were papers and books being scattered about. I was nearly to the art room at this point, so I ended up just sprinting there. When I got there, the room was bustling with people running in all different directions. After letting a few more people into the room, the teacher decided to close the door and lock it. We turned off the lights and then all gathered in the back of the classroom where we wouldn't be visible from the window in the door. It was almost completely silent in the room despite there being at least 30 people in there. I was doing my best not to expect the worst. Maybe this was just a false alarm. The teacher got a notification on her phone and we watched as her eyes grew wide as she read it. In a hushed voice, she informed us that there had been a murder in a neighborhood down the road from the school, and the police had reason to think the suspect was hiding somewhere nearby, possibly in the school. I couldn't believe what was happening. This seemed like something from a horror movie. One of the younger girls in the class was so scared that she was crying and shaking, and a few other kids were trying to comfort her. Because I was sitting closest to the supply closet, the teacher asked me to go in the closet and grab a blanket. The supply closet was a very spacious walk-in closet with rows of shelves on either side. I scanned the shelves looking for a blanket when all of a sudden I noticed something strange. In the back corner of the closet were long pieces of fabric hanging up that were used for sewing projects. Behind the fabric, I saw a pair of dirty shoes. Someone was hiding back there. I wondered why they weren't with the rest of the class when all of a sudden it hit me. Was that the murder suspect? My heart was beating like crazy. I knew the best thing I could do was pretend I didn't know the person was there. Trying to appear as calm as possible, I grabbed the blanket before turning off the lights in the closet and shutting the door. I handed the blanket to the girl before going up to the teacher and whispering to her what I had seen. I knew if the other students found out what I had seen, there would be a panic and that would not end well. I could see the fear in the teacher's eyes, but she said nothing, just picked up her phone and sent a message to the front desk. 10 minutes of silence went by before the teacher got another notification. She then stood up and told us that she had been told that we needed to walk calmly out of the classroom and go to the middle school across the street until the school was cleared. We did as we were told. Part of me was sure that the suspect was going to chase after us, but the closet door remained shut. Once we were out of the school, we began running at a full-on sprint until we reached the middle school. We stayed there for hours until our parents were eventually able to come pick us up. On the news that night, we found out that the SWAT team came to the school and was able to capture the suspect without anyone getting hurt. A shiver goes down my spine anytime I go into the closet, even now.
I'm gonna give away this incredible $4,000. Wait, no, not this one. This.
Sorry, I don't have YouTube Premium. Okay. See, this is funny because it's not funny. I'm sorry that a murderer ran into your school. But I'm glad they caught the person. And I feel bad for your school, but I've been in a similar situation. The bomb threat. That's all I'm going to say. I think that's all I'm legally allowed to say, is the bomb threat.
One day I was walking to math class and one of my friends stopped me to ask if I was ready for the test we had that day. I told her I was confused because I thought the test wasn't until next week. She insisted that it was today, and she said she had been up all night studying for it. My heart sank. The test was a huge part of my grade and I wasn't prepared for it at all. I was so panicked that I told my friend to tell the teacher I was sick and I was going to hide in the bathroom. She told me she would. I quickly ducked into the nearest bathroom and went into the last stall, preparing to spend the next hour on my phone. I was hanging my backpack up on the hook on the stall door when all of a sudden an announcement came through on the intercom. It was the school principal. He said that the school was now under lockdown and that this was an emergency. Everyone was to get to the nearest classroom and follow lockdown procedures. At first, I assumed this was a drill until all the lights went out, leaving me in pitch darkness. This had never happened in any of our drills before. Was there actually a real emergency? I frantically texted my friend from math class and asked her if she knew what was going on. She texted me back right away and said that a male student had been seen threatening another male student over a knife. It was supposedly an argument over a girl, but the rumor was that the guy was completely deranged and there was no telling who he might hurt. I had little to no protection, so I was terrified. I climbed up on the toilet seat so no one would be able to see my feet, and I tried to stay as quiet as possible. Several minutes went by before I heard footsteps enter the bathroom. It was someone crying, but I couldn't figure out if it was a boy or a girl. They entered the stall next to me and closed the door. I heard something metal fall on the floor, and I looked down to see the point of a long silver knife. I don't know what went through my mind at that moment, but my sheer panic caused me to make a run for it. I unlocked the stall door and started sprinting through the hallways. I kept running until I got out of the school, my arms in the air as I came face to face with an army of police officers. After they patted me down, I explained exactly where the suspect was. Luckily, they were able to catch the guy without anyone getting hurt. It turned out that the guy didn't end up stabbing anyone, he just threatened him. He did, of course, still get into plenty of legal trouble, and he hasn't been back at school since.
Okay, I have another story, guys. So, this is why you don't skip class. You never know what's going to happen. Quite literally, anytime I've thought, I've never skipped class before because, like, what's the point? I'm in middle school and I fail my classes most of the time. I don't have the time to skip my classes because if I skip my classes, my mother's going to request for me to get held back. So, So, I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at, like, my thing on the screen. So. Anyways, but anytime I've thought about skipping class, that thought has occurred in my brain, it's like, heebie-jeebies. My video paused? My video's not paused, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But, anyways, back to the video.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I was sitting next to my best friend Kayla in geometry. The teacher had finished the rest of the lesson and was giving us the rest of class time to get a head start on homework. Kayla was trying to explain to me a problem I didn't understand when all of a sudden we were interrupted by the intercom. There was an announcement that we were under an active lockdown and everyone needed to shelter in place immediately. We asked the teacher if she had been warned that we were going to have a drill, and she told us no. The teachers were always warned about lockdown drills, so this was when we realized this could actually be a serious thing. The teacher locked the door and turned off the lights. Then we began working together to push our heavy metal desks up against the door so that no one could get in. We then hid in a corner of the room. I was tucked underneath the teacher's desk along.
Okay, so at my school, some teachers pass out rocks. Some teachers puts, like, my English teacher, he shoved a chair in the doorknob, so, like, he can't get it anyway, so it's, like, and he has a bat in his classroom, because he wanted one, and so now he just has multiple bats in his classroom. But there's another English teacher that will pass out rocks, and like, some teachers will just pass out anything to help the students out, but yeah. We don't hide under desks like wimps. We get stuff to defend ourselves with. But I understand if that's your school protocol. At my school, it's like, so every classroom has like a window. They have 2 windows. So a window for like that anyone could fit through. That's low enough to the ground so we can like crawl out. And then there's also the big window by the door.
With a few other students. We were all quiet, checking our phones to see if we could figure out what was going on. I was looking through the news app when I saw that there was a crazy man believed to be on drugs that was involved in an assault right by our school. It was believed that he may have entered our school and was still on the loose. I shared this information with the class, and we were all even more terrified. A few girls started to cry, and some people were texting their parents to let them know what was going on. I had a sister who was a freshman, who was also in the building, and I texted her to see if she was okay and asked if she knew what was going on. 15 painful minutes went by before she texted me back. She said someone had been banging on her classroom door and screaming profanities for the last 10 minutes, but they had finally gone away. I decided to keep this information to myself, not wanting to freak my classmates out even more. But before long, I heard yelling in the distance and held my breath, hoping that whoever it was would just pass by the classroom. But before long, there was a sudden banging at the door, followed by a crazed laughter. The man began taunting us, telling us that he had a gun, and there was no point in hiding because he was going to get us. We were horrified, but did our best to stay quiet. Our teacher was on the phone with 911, giving them a whispered update of what was happening. Suddenly, there was a loud gunshot from the hallway, causing several of us to cry out loudly. The man outside laughed even harder. There were shouts from further down the hallway, and I understood to be police officers. They demanded the man drop his weapon. After several requests, they tased him, and I heard him screaming like crazy. Around 30 more minutes went by before we were finally told that the school had been cleared, the man had been taken into custody, and we were free to go.
Okay, on the bright side, you were able to go home afterwards. When my school got a bomb threat, they kept us there for the rest of the day. I wanted to go home. I like my house.
When I was in high school, we had a teacher named Mr. Dickinson who taught both history and government. Typically, you would take history your junior year and government your senior year, so you would have him 2 years in a row. When I first met him in my junior year, I thought he was the nicest person. He seemed to really be passionate about teaching, and he had a lot of patience even with the kids who were a little bit slower to learn. He let kids retake tests if they did really badly, and even got to school really early in the morning to tutor kids that were having a hard time. He was actually one of my favorite teachers,
nice.
and seemed to
See, before she ruins this for me, okay, kind of sounds like my math teacher. He let us retake tests so many times that I got to the point where he had to stop letting us retake tests in class. Because he'd be like, oh no, I failed the test. Like, can I retake it? And then he'd be like, yeah, sure, let me redo that for you. And it got to the point where he'd eventually be like, yeah, you can come to one of my 9th blocks. I often forget that I need to retake tests, and I don't pick my own 9th blocks. My friend Ashley would pick my 9th block, so I often would just be like, well, I guess, never mind. But it wasn't really like that because we would often go to his 9th blocks because he would just let us down our friends if we wanted to.
genuinely like me. Towards the end of our junior year, Mr. Dickens' wife had a little baby boy named Matthew, and he was happier than ever. He had a photograph of his son that he would keep on his desk at all times. He would always show us pictures of him and would talk to us about the baby's first time crawling or standing up. It was clear that he was a very proud dad. But during the beginning of my senior year of high school, Mr. Dickens' whole life came crashing down around him. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone and rumors traveled fast. It didn't take us students very long to find out what happened, and it shocked us all completely. Carol, Mr. Dickens' wife, had been cheating on him with one of their neighbors. It had been going on for years, since even before the two of them got married. As it turned out, Matthew really wasn't Mr. Dickens' son after all. After all of this happened, Mr. Dickens went completely crazy. He ended up going through their house and breaking anything he could get his hands on. He smashed their furniture and broke some paintings that had been in Carol's family for generations. The police ended up having to come and calm him down. Carol filed for divorce, and Mr. Dickens had to move into an apartment. He wasn't allowed at school for a while, and we had a substitute teacher for nearly a month. The rumor was that he was in a mental asylum, but I have no idea if that was really true. Then, on one random Monday, Mr. Dickinson came back to school. The picture of baby Matthew had been taken off his desk, but that was probably the smallest thing that had changed. Mr. Dickinson had become a completely different person. He had cut off his long, hippie-like hair and shaved his face. Instead of his nerdy graphic t-shirts he always used to wear, he wore a long button-down shirt and slacks. His laid-back smile was gone, and he had a harsh, mean attitude. He yelled at us for little things, like needing to borrow a pencil in class. Strangely, he was the meanest to the girls. I worried if his wife cheating on him had made him hate all females. I felt like I couldn't even make eye contact with him without him screaming at me. I did my best to blend in with the rest of the class and go unnoticed. It was sad how much he had changed. It was as if his old self had died and been replaced with this other person. One day it was close to finals time, and we all had to do a final project for government that we would later present to the class. We were all hard at work on our projects while Mr. Dickinson sat at his desk grading papers. He was in a particularly bad mood that day, so we were being careful to be extra quiet while working on our laptops. We were only a few minutes into class when the lights went out completely. It was a stormy day outside, so very little light came in from the windows, and the room was dark. After a few minutes, the principal got on the intercom and announced that there was an electrical problem going on, and we were out of power completely. They didn't know how long it was going to take to fix it. We were all supposed to go on about our business as best we could in the meantime. Of course, in our class we were using laptops, and without the internet, we couldn't get any work done. This completely enraged Mr. Dickinson to the point where he began screaming at us as if it was our fault. He threw a chalkboard eraser across the room and nearly hit a kid. We were all just staring at him in silence as he screamed, too afraid to move a muscle. It was clear to me that he had lost his mind. We needed to get help right away. Mr. Dickinson was swearing at us, and his face was completely red. His eyes looked crazed. I don't know what came over me, but I felt the need to speak up. Mr. Dickinson, please, don't you think you should calm down? He walked over to me, glaring at me with a look of complete hate. Before I could even react, he slapped me right across the face. I burst into tears immediately, and several kids jumped out of their seats. The biggest guy in the class, a football player named Mark, put himself between me and Mr. Dickinson. They were starting to stare each other down. Mia, go next door to Mrs. Riley's class and tell her that Mr. Dickinson has lost it and we need police in here, Mark said calmly to the girl sitting next to me. Mia jumped up to do this, but before she could, Mr. Dickinson ran to the door. His mood suddenly changed. It was like he realized what he had done and now was scared about what was going to happen to him. He grabbed a trash can that was filled with paper and set it down in the entrance of our classroom. He then took a lighter from his pocket and lit the paper on fire. Before I could even process what he was doing, he dumped the trash can over, causing the burning papers to fall onto the carpet. He then walked out of the classroom and locked the door behind him, trapping us inside. Complete chaos broke out in our classroom. The fire was spreading quickly because of how much carpeting was in the room, and there were several people trying to put it out at once. Someone called 911, screamed Mia, but we weren't allowed to have our cell phones on us during...
Hear me out. Best friend. I have a water bottle. So, here? Yeah? Wants me to jump that out for them. I could spray down the door and crawl out. I don't know. Where'd you... The window. I'm hoping you have windows in your classroom, best friend. I'm actually hoping you have windows.
They had to stay in our lockers. What about the landline? Someone asked, gesturing towards the cord phone sitting on Mr. Dickinson's desk. The power's out, remember? I'm not dying in here, Mark said. He jumped over the flames and began shoving his body into the door over and over, trying to break it down. A couple of his football friends joined him, but our walls had recently been reinforced as a safety precaution in case that we had an active shooter somewhere in the building. I would have never thought that our biggest threat would have been right inside the classroom.
They don't prepare you for that.
We were screaming for help, and we could see through the glass in the door that a few kids were gathered outside. They were trying to open the door for us, but of course they didn't have a key. Go get a teacher, Mark screamed at them. By this point, the entire room had filled up with smoke, and it was hard to even see where we were going. We were all coughing, and it was getting harder and harder to breathe. I knew we were running out of time. The flames were getting out of control at this point, and I had pressed my body against the wall to try to get away from them. Mark was still working on getting the door down, but wasn't making any progress. He was getting tired and running out of breath. "We need to break a window," I screamed. Everyone seemed to agree with me, and we began throwing anything we could find into the window trying to break it. It was a lot stranger than it looked, and nothing was working. Finally, Mike told us all to stand back. This was a hard thing to do without literally stepping into the fire. I screamed as the flames touched my ankles and arms. I couldn't get away from the fire anymore. Mike took a heavy metal desk, picked it up over his head, and threw it into the window. The glass shattered instantly. Now we had another problem. We were on the second story of the building. If we jumped out of the window, we would definitely hurt ourselves, but at least now we had some fresh air. All 15 of us were packed around the window, doing our best to keep breathing. "What can we use as a rope?" Someone asked. They had to practically yell to be heard through the cackling of the flames. We ended up using the only thing we had, our clothes. We began tying hoodies and coats together, but it still wasn't long enough. The guys started taking off their shirts and adding them to the makeshift rope. Not having enough oxygen was beginning to affect me, and I felt like I could pass out at any moment. I sank to my knees, not able to hold myself up anymore. "I'm going to die," I thought to myself. And what a terrible way to go. Locked up in a fire that my deranged teacher set in order to kill us.
Well, he's
The
definitely
guys were
deranged.
tying girls to the rope and slowly letting them out through the window. It didn't stretch all the way to the ground, but they were able to jump the extra couple of feet. The plan was to get all the girls out first, and then the guys were going to go. Where was the fire department? Hadn't someone from the school office called for help yet?
No,
My
they're
thoughts
stupid.
were getting jumbled, and it was harder and harder to stay awake. I felt like I was in a bad dream,
Send
and
her
things were
out.
moving very slowly around me. I could feel someone with strong arms picking me up off the ground and placing me down close to the window. Through the smoke, I could see several guys working on tying the rope around me. They were all coughing like crazy. The next thing I knew, I was being slowly lowered to the ground. The cold air felt so good against my skin after spending so much time so close to the fire. I didn't know how the rope was staying together. I was sure some of the clothing had to have torn by now. I was shocked when my feet touched the ground. Mia and a couple of the other girls were untying the rope from around me so it could be lowered back up again. I finally heard sirens in the distance and knew that the fire department was on its way. Kids were everywhere, running and trying to get as far away from the building as possible. There was a fire truck after fire truck and a ton of ambulances. Mia was screaming out to get someone's attention and help me. Finally, some paramedics with a stretcher made their way over to me and began helping me. They put an oxygen mask over my face, and I slowly began to breathe a little bit better. They put me onto the stretcher and loaded me into the ambulance. I couldn't talk because the mask was over my face, but I could hear everything that was going on. "Did they catch him?" I heard one of the paramedics ask. "No, he's completely missing," someone said. My heart sank as I realized that Mr. Dickinson might actually get away with what he did. When I
No.
woke up, I was in a hospital bed, and my parents were on either side of me.